Today is Wednesday, October the 12th, 2011, and Joe Turner and myself, Judy Meyer, are talking to Elizabeth Gerdiman. Is that correct, how you pronounce your name?
My name is Elizabeth Gerdiman.
Can you spell that for us?
The last name? Gerdiman. And my maiden name is Nowack, Nowack.
N-O-W. Okay, thank you. Would you mind telling us where you were born?
I was born, that's a good question. I was born in St. Mary's Hospital in St. Louis, which is, I don't know if it's St. Mary's anymore or not, but it was in St. Louis.
Was it downtown St. Louis?
Downtown.
Okay. And would you mind telling us when you were born?
August the 28th, 1932.
Thank you. Well, when you were born, where did you live?
We lived, what I remember, I think we lived in St. John's, but my mother and father lived on Raymond Avenue, and that's in Pattonville, off of St. Charles Rock Road.
Off of Old St. Charles, I believe.
Off of, not old, off of the St. Charles Rock Road, by the children's home, by Miss Lucas.
Oh, I'm
Miss
sorry,
Lucas
of course.
pasture was
Of course, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
And then we lived there until my father became ill.
What
And
happened to your father, may I
he
ask?
had cancer
Oh.
of the pancreas. He was
Oh.
very young, 32. He died.
Oh, that's so sad.
So I attended to Pattonville Grade School,
Which was where?
which was on Fifi.
Okay.
Yeah, Fifi. Have to think for a minute. It was on Fifi, and I went there for first grade and kindergarten.
Okay.
But I didn't finish first grade because of the illness and his death and everything. We moved to my grandmother's and grandfather's, and their name was Herman and Ella Van Harn, and they lived on Tosick Avenue.
So this were your maternal grandparents,
That is true.
and they lived on, how do you pronounce that?
Tosick.
Tosick.
Taussig.
And that's close to that railroad over there?
Close to the railroad.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky because I had, my grandparents lived on one side of the railroad, and then my father's parents lived on the other side.
Is that how your mother and father met? Because
That's
they
right.
lived close?
They lived close,
Did they get married real young?
Yeah, they were, yeah, because Mom was, well, he was older than my mother. He was 32 when he died, and so she was younger than he. Yeah.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a sister, Margaret, and it was 18 months when Dad died.
Wow.
Yeah, so she doesn't remember living on Raymond Avenue the first time. We lived on Raymond Avenue twice.
Twice?
Well, see, when my father died, then we moved out with Grandma, and then the war came. There was the World War II, and so we didn't get to go back to Raymond Avenue for a long time, and then my mother remarried, and that's when we went back to Raymond Avenue.
I see.
So we went back, I went back when I was in high school, and Margaret went back. I don't remember if she graduated from Pattonville or Bonfils. I don't remember that, yeah.
Well, was Bonfils the school then you attended when you lived with your grandparents? Where was Bonfils School?
Bonfils is on Tosick Avenue. My grandparents, there was one house in between Bonfils and my grandparents. So I never got to eat lunch at school. I always had to go home. But that's where we stayed.
How many classes were there at Bonfils School when you were there?
There were 8, and they had the big room and the little room. And there were 4 grades in one room and 4 grades in the other room.
Do you remember who the
Yes, I do.
teachers were?
Mrs. Wilson was for the small room, and Gladys Jones was the teacher that I loved. I just loved her. She lived in Clayton. She rode a bus and came to school. And one time she even brought a record player so we could hear Peter and the Wolf.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And we had to listen to the instruments.
Right,
and everything,
yeah.
Peter the Wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And they even cooked. She even cooked because some of the kids that came to Bonfils lived down by the river in Sandtown.
What is Sandtown, please? I don't know what that is.
Oh, Sandtown is at the edge of the river where the rock road goes into the river.
Okay.
And where the sand company.
And where the sand company is. And they were poor people because they were always flooded out.
Oh, yeah.
And and they came a long distance to school. So what happened was, like my grandmother and different mothers would make soup and sandwiches and bring it to school because they had a picnic table in the basement. And then Miss Jones or Miss Wilson would go downstairs and warm it up when it got lunchtime. And that's what they did.
Sounds very nice.
Yeah.
Very, very nice.
So I had fun in school. We had the outdoor toilet, you know. We had to play baseball. I didn't like to play baseball because I was not very good. And we made leaf houses.
Leaf houses. What are leaf houses?
Well, we take branches of the tree and you make a house in the corner of the fence. And then you take and bring all the leaves and you pile them all the leaves. And we must have been filthy, you know. And then we get inside and then you put leaves on the floor. And then you'd sit in there.
Oh, so this was big enough for you to sit
Oh,
in.
we all did it. Jean Kuhlman, Don Kuhlman, Sherman, all of us, we made leaf houses.
Well, I guess, that was a thing to do. Now, we talked to Don Coleman. We had a real nice interview with Don Coleman.
Yes, I understand.
And who is Sherman that you're referring to?
Sherman Niemiller. And
Was he your age?
yeah, I graduated from high school with him and with Don. Mm-hmm.
And Don Coleman told us that he lived,
He lived in Missouri Bottom Road.
thank you,
Mhm.
yes.
He did. He lived down there. I couldn't go down there on my bicycle
Why is that?
because we were by the railroad, and there were what we call tramps, transient people. So I had orders, my sister and I, if we rode bicycles, we had areas that we couldn't go to. And so I didn't go down on Missouri Bottom Road except with Grandma and Grandpa, but I've been down there a lot, just not a single, yeah.
Did your mother drive a car?
She did drive a car, but we rode buses. We rode the bus. There was a bus line that went on the Rock Road from Wellston to St. Charles, and we lived on that bus because we went to church in St. Charles.
Okay.
Yes.
Did your mother work after your father passed away?
Oh, yes, she had to.
What kind of work did she do?
Well, first she'd house kept some house in Clayton. She cooked and house kept, but she was ill, so she had to go in the hospital. So then she was a secretary for an attorney.
I see.
And then during the war, she was a riveter
Oh,
on planes.
so was my mother.
Well, she did.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Bonfils School went up to what, 8th grade?
8th grade.
And then you went on to the high school,
High
or was
school.
there a junior high then?
No, you went straight into high school.
Okay.
So we went from this 2-room setting to the high school, where you went to this room for English and this room for history. And
Was it scary for you at
it was
first?
different. It was really different. But then I wasn't alone because all us farm kids were the same way. Yeah. I grew up in a good age because I got to see the thrashing and the butchering and those things before they became a thing of the past.
I see.
Yeah. So my grandkids always say, "Tell me about the old days, Grandma."
Well, that's what we're here also, is to hear about the old days
Yeah,
and what you remember. And anything you would like to interject, please do.
Well, I do remember the floods.
Okay.
if you talk to anybody in the bottoms, they'll talk about the floods.
And that's important,
Yeah,
and
it was.
we definitely want to hear
It
your
was
take on
It was
that.
everyone's livelihood. Now, my grandparents, the Van Harns, lived on Tosick Avenue, but his farm was down where it flooded. And we were on the high ground, and there was a pasture in front of my grandparents' house that Adams Dairy kept their cows, some of their cows in, and they had a milking barn there. So we took care of their cows. But then when the floods came, the farmers in the bottoms brought their equipment up, and it would be in the front yard and everywhere, and then they'd bring their animals up because we had to take care of their animals. And it was exciting. I was a kid. It was very exciting to
When
be around that
you know,
time.
I have never experienced a flooding situation. So possibly you could tell me when it would flood, like how long would it take for this whole process to be? Like, did they know it was happening? Did you know in advance? Because I know they didn't have the Doppler radar like we have now.
I was a kid, so I don't know. There was talk.
Okay.
I don't know the details. I do know that, yes, they would know that the flood was coming, apparently, because that's when they would bring the animals out, and they'd bring we had all the equipment and the tractors, and then Grandma would cook, and she'd wash clothes for the people. Well, see, they didn't have water. It took a long time, because the floods would come, but it seemed like it took a long time for it to leave. And then they would come out in boats, and sometimes I'd get to ride in the boat to go to, like, Gus, that would have been my great uncle, Gus Van Harn, lived down on Missouri Bottom Road, down there where Don Kuman lived. And so I can remember going there, because it was way up in their kitchen.
Oh.
And then they stayed in the houses because people would steal. Even in those days, they stole. So, and like they would move the chickens up in the haylofts in the barn. And there was a lot of work with the flood.
Yeah.
There was a lot of work with the floods, yeah. And we had a series of floods, like, I thought they said like 6 or 7 years of floods. It was a lot of flooding, and so there was a lot of all this going on. And you've probably heard this from a lot of other people, but it was an exciting time for a kid. I'm sure it was terrible for the people.
Yes. Sounds like it was very awful.
I just remember Mom and Grandma and my aunt baking and making bread and cooking and washing clothes. Well, they washed clothes for the tramps too.
Really?
See, by living on the railroad, there were a lot of tramps or bums. That's what they called them. Now they would call them homeless, but that's what they call them. And
were they afraid or leery of these people, or
No.
for the most part were they
No.
just down on their luck?
They're just down on their luck, and they never would come in your house. They'd come on your porch. And my grandma Van Harn and my grandma Nowack, they just cooked meals for them. And then
these were Depression years, and there
Well,
were
those
there were
were.
a lot of people on the road then, right?
There were, I
Much
guess.
more than would
See,
be
I'm
nowadays.
a kid, so I just know what I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they would feed them, and then they'd pack up a lunch for them for when they went. And sometimes their clothes were dirty, and then I remember Grandma washing their clothes, And then sometimes they slept in the hayloft, and we had a peach tree out by the porch, and when the thrashing crew came, they did this too. They would hang a mirror out there.
A mirror.
Yeah, so they could shave.
Oh, okay. I wasn't quite following.
Oh, sure. They
Okay.
had to have a mirror, and they had
Okay.
a table. They'd put a table out there, and they'd wash up out there. And then when the thrashing crew came through, then Grandpa would have a tub, and Grandma would heat the water, and we would help. But anyway, we'd have to fill the tub, and then those men would take a bath out in the barn. We couldn't go. But,
That's good. That's good.
but these you were careful. You didn't lock your doors, you know, but I don't seem to be afraid, excepting I do remember being warned about being on the railroad or being warned about talking to strangers and that kind of thing. But they welcomed the tramps, you know.
Did
both
they
of my
work for
grandparents.
your grandparents? Did they do any?
Sometimes they would, yeah. Sometimes they'd help, and sometimes they didn't, and they'd just say, "Do you have a cup of coffee?" And of course, there always was coffee and coffee cake and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, you said then you went to Pattonville
Mhm.
School. Was that the one that was on St. Charles Rock Road?
I went to Pattonville Grade School, which was on Fifi,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to Pattonville High School, which was on St. Charles Rock Road.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
How many were in your class when you let me ask,
44.
did you graduate?
I graduated in 1950. There were 44, and about 15 of us get together still.
How nice.
One every other couple months.
Wow.
Well, we didn't at first because we were busy having babies and
Mhm.
everything else. But then we had so much fun planning our reunions that why don't we get together some more? So now we still do. We see each other about every other month.
That's wonderful.
It's a close knit group.
Well, when you were in Pattonville, the high school, did you take part or did you have any extracurricular activities that you did?
Yeah, we had. I was a cheerleader.
Oh, you were?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, that's easy to be a cheerleader in a small school. It's either you or you. Yeah. So, but.
Did someone teach you what to do so you knew what cheers to do or what to do?
No, I don't know how we knew what to do. We just did them, I guess. You know, I just remember.
Did you have a special outfit you wore?
Yeah, we had our outfits and all we had. It was popular. You had the white skirt, you know, with the sweater, and then we advanced to one year we wore black pants.
Oh.
Yeah, and we had they played baseball, but we didn't have football because we didn't have a gym.
Oh.
And so we had to use Berkeley's gym if we played basketball. And then we had what we called the barn, and it must have been an army barracks or something like that. We got big stuff, and we called it the barn, but it was more like an army barracks. And
Really?
that's where we had our proms
Oh.
and our dances and our any event that we had that went out there.
When you were in high school, were you still living with your grandparents, or by this time had you
I
moved
had
on Raymond?
moved back with my mother because she had married to my stepfather, Frank Bauman, and they lived on Raymond Avenue.
Why do you think that she went back to Raymond? Was it the same house? Was it still available, or did she just?
She still owned it.
Oh, well, had she rented it out then?
She rented it to the Woodcocks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so then when she was ready, see, there was a war going on, and so I'm trying to remember that. That's I never expected that question.
No, that's okay. That's all right.
See, my mother was very young when Dad died, and then when she met Frank, which we called him Frank,
What was his last name?
Bauman, Bauman.
There's a funeral home by that name. Is that correct?
He's not connected.
Oh,
with
okay.
it, but
The name
is the
just-
same name. That is the same name. No, she met him when she was working down for the attorney,
I see.
and then there was the war. So then all my uncles and Frank went into service. So then Mom continued to live with Grandma because everybody was gone. And so my mom worked at Curtis Wright, and then my grandpa worked at Curtis Wright because all the floods came at that time too. I was happy because my family made me happy, but I think it was not a good time, you know.
Looking back, you
Yeah,
know.
I know, they had
times were
problems.
hard.
Yeah, I know, yeah. But then when he got out of service and everything, she still had her house, and he loved the house, and he loved us kids, so that's why we went back.
I see.
Mhm.
Did you work part-time as a young girl, maybe as a teenager? Did you have a job, a part-time
Well, I
job of
picked,
some sort?
See, my grandfather, Van Harn, farmed wheat and corn, so I learned how to drive a tractor at a very young age because he didn't have any grandsons. And so I would help rake hay and do things. But I also worked with my grandpa Nowack, who was a truck patch farmer, and he raised vegetables and berries and just like Pruitts. I mean, they were in competition with each other. And then he would go down to the market every night, and I helped wash potatoes, and I helped pick. I have long fingers and long arms, so I could pick raspberries and everything good. And then I also worked at Pruitts, and I would pick their berries too.
Where was the market that they went to?
Seward?
They went all the way to downtown?
Down there, yeah. They go every night, yeah. And so you'd have to wash the potatoes, and you'd have to, after you picked the berries and everything, then you had to go through it again, because some of the pickers would cheat and they'd put leaves and things in. Well, people, when the produce is coming in, a lot of people come and work in the fields, and some cheat. A little bit, you know, yeah.
Well, when you graduated from high school then, what did you do? After high school,
After
what
high
was
school.
next for you?
Let's see, I worked for Penny's. I worked for J.C. Penney's.
And where was
when I was
Penny's?
in high school, in Main Street in St. Charles.
Oh, you went over to St. Charles, okay.
Oh, yeah, we went to church over here, so we were always in St. Charles. And then, what else did I do? Then I worked for Central Hardware when I was in high school. And my first job, I did write credit applications. But the first day that I went to work, I was teased because I had to sell fertilizer. And so my mom and them gave me a rough time about that. But
Where was
that's,
the Central Hardware?
Central Hardware was down on Easton Avenue
Oh,
in Wellston.
Right in Wellston.
That I would never go to now. But it was, Wellston had a lot of stores, and your buses, all your public transportation, it was a hub, and you could go anywhere from Wellston.
And is that how you got to work, by bus?
Oh, yeah, I always rode a bus. And we'd go to the opera.
What?
We'd
Oh,
ride
to the Muni
bus.
Opera?
We'd go there and ride the bus, and then you'd catch the last bus home. I don't know what would have happened if we would have missed the bus.
Right. No cell phones to call for help.
No. One time, I'm rambling.
That's okay.
But one time, I can remember and then I worked for Central Hardware. I should finish first. And then I went to, when I graduated, I worked for a housewares buyer for Central Hardware.
A what?
Housewares buyer. They bought all the pots and pans and whatever you needed to do for that. And then, when I got married, my husband was in Alexandria, Virginia, so then I worked for the Pentagon.
Oh,
So I had a
well,
nice
let's
job.
do talk about this. Where and how did you meet?
My husband?
Yes.
Oh, at church. I went to St. John's Church on 5th Street here in St. Charles, and he was a year older than I, and we went to Friendship League, and we just got together. And so then, of course, now I dated him sort of off and on. In those days, you didn't just date one person. You went with a group, or you might date somebody on Saturday and somebody else on Sunday. You know, it wasn't like now you have to be so steady.
Exclusive.
Yeah. But
Did he have a car as a young guy?
Of course he had a car. Yeah, don't ask me what. Little Ford. Yeah. And then he would come over, because Pattonville, I lived in Pattonville, and that was a hick town.
Is that what you think the people thought of it?
That's what they did say it
Was it because there were so many farmers yet there?
Yeah, I think so. And see, St. Charles is a big city.
Oh, okay.
And so.
And let me say, we are in St. Charles right now.
We are in St. Charles, yes.
And go on about your future husband. What's his name?
Oh, his name was Willis. We call him Will. And we got married. It was the Korean War at that time. And everybody was in the service. They got drafted. So he got drafted.
What kind of work was he doing before he got drafted?
He worked for Wagner Electric.
Oh, okay.
And then he went in service.
And were you working for Central Hardware at that time?
Central Hardware at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to service, and then we were going to be married. And so then we got married, and I moved with him up to Alexandria and worked in Pentagon.
At the Pentagon?
Yeah, and then he got transferred, and then we lived in Watertown, New York, which is right across from Canada.
Oh.
And I may as well go on. And then, of course, I got pregnant. And of course, he went overseas.
Oh.
So then he didn't see our son Don until he was about 10 months old.
Oh. And you were all by yourself there?
Well, then I was back on Raymond Avenue with my mom.
You came back. You didn't stay up there at
No,
Water.
no. I came home.
What did you do for the Pentagon?
Well, I could take shorthand, and I could.
Did you learn shorthand when you were in high school?
Oh, sure. We did with Miss Cobb. We had Miss Cobb was the shorthand teacher. Miss Woods was our math teacher.
When you took shorthand, did you also learn to type on a manual typewriter?
Of course. And then you had to type. You had to type everything right. And if you didn't, then you had to start over again. And now we have electric, and now we
spell
have
check.
computers, and everything is wonderful. But we learned how. And Mom bought a Royal typewriter so I could practice at home. And we don't have it, but I can remember you punched so hard. Oh, to do that, yeah.
And
But-
if you made a mistake, then what? What did you do?
Then you had to start over again. But what's interesting is Miss Cobb and Miss Rosen, Miss Woods, we thought they were old.
Yes, uh-huh.
And they aren't.
They
Because
weren't?
my children went to Pattonville High School, and they had the same teachers. Isn't that neat?
Our perceptions change, don't
Yes,
they?
and they must not have been old, Yeah.
Did you have music and art and gym class?
Yeah, we did. We had Miss Riestick was with our history teacher, and she was fascinated with Queen Elizabeth when she was inaugurated and all of that. I can remember that. And trying to think of some of the other teachers, and we had Mr. Woods, and then they had shop. And
Did the girls get to take shop?
they had like a shop club, because I can remember going to some club, and we made some kind of a tray that you pounded, and I still have it, or I had it, I don't know if I still have it, but my mom saved it, so then when she died, then I got it, but that's.
You were saying about going to prom and dances. When you went to the dances, did you buy ready-made dresses or?
No. You made your clothes. Well, I'm tall. Now, maybe the shorter ones did. My girlfriend, she could buy things because she was short. But, no, we made our clothes. Yeah. Most of us made our clothes, yeah. Because we learned how to sew. We had a home ec class, and we learned how to sew.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Mrs. Rosen. She was our teacher. And then we learned how to bake. And it was always funny because when we were baking bread or something in class, then the boys would hang outside the window. And then we'd pass the food out the window to the guys. Yeah.
Well, there's nothing like the smell of fresh baked bread.
No, there really isn't.
But didn't you, and most of the girls, I mean, I'm assuming maybe incorrectly, didn't you know these things though, growing up?
Oh, we knew all that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we knew that. But we took the class because we wanted to know better. And we did learn better.
Okay.
Because we made suits and we had a fashion show.
Oh, how nice.
We did all of that, yeah. But yes, in growing up, I don't know about everybody, but since I grew up on a farm, I knew how to make butter. And I knew how to do all that kind of stuff. And I liked bought bread. Now I like homemade bread.
Uh-huh.
But I liked to get the bought bread. And then they would come around, trying to think how that worked. The White Bakery would come in a truck to your house, and they would you could buy rolls and buns and donuts.
Was that a luxury?
Oh, that was special if they came, and then you'd have that on Saturday or Sunday, you could have it. And then on Raymond Avenue, the milkmen came, and I can remember Mom having a box on the porch, and then the bottle had a little extra thing on it, and I think the cream collected in there. And then if she wanted something special, butter or something, then she'd put a note on that box, and then he'd leave whatever he had. And I think, boy, wouldn't they fuss about that now?
Well, I'm wondering a lack of refrigeration personally, like how long would that milk stay on the porch?
I don't know.
I mean, that's what I'm
That's what I
wondering.
would think of, yeah. Well, I think, Mom, they had ice, because I remember we had an ice box and it would drip. They had a pan under that. Then you took that water and then you would put that on your plants or take it out to the tomato plants, you know. Nothing got wasted. Nothing got wasted.
So this was really a time of going green, which is the real big byword right now, isn't it?
I laugh about when they talk, they say, oh, it's so wonderful that it's green. Well, we did that. We would cut, the envelopes. You cut that sticky stuff off of the envelope for the label.
Yes.
And then when you make jelly, then you write raspberry jelly and what year you did, and then you put that on the jar. And you used every bit of the envelope that came. And just like when you make butter, then you had, because butter was good, but then butter doesn't keep like it does now. When you make homemade butter, it doesn't last as long. And I suppose that's why they have all these recipes for, they use the butter, because it wouldn't last that long in the refrigerator. So it would get strong. So then they cooked with that butter, and then you'd make new butter. But then you had buttermilk, or else on the porch you made cottage cheese. And when I told my grandkids how we made cottage cheese, they go, ugh.
Are there some things we better off not knowing?
I think so.
Well,
Just like blood sausage.
Oh.
That, yeah.
Oh. Well, how long did you live on Raymond Avenue till you got married,
Yes.
would you say?
Yeah, I did.
And then you and your husband, did you live in Bridgeton as well?
When he got out of service, we lived on Main Street in the McElhaney house.
Which was where?
It's a historical house that's now historical, but it's on Main Street.
Oh, really? Main Street, St. Charles?
Yeah, and well, his parents lived on Main Street
Oh.
in St. Charles before it got popular. His folks had a house on Main Street, 825 South Main, and it's now a store, this old house.
Oh, okay.
But when the festival first came to St. Charles, they would hook extension cord into his parents' home because that's how they got their electric for whatever they were doing out there. And I can remember his parents were laughing and they're going, "That'll never go." And it's, you know what the festival is now.
Very big.
Yeah, it's
Very big, isn't
yeah,
it?
Yeah. Mhm.
Right, I used to go.
So we lived there. I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. And then we moved to Woodson Terrace, and then we built a home in St. Anne.
Okay, well, neighbors of Pattonville.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Was
That's
it
why my
called,
kids went to
was it
Pattonville.
always called Pattonville rather than Bridgeton?
What I know of it, yeah. Now, my mother lived, well, she lived on Raymond Avenue until she died, and then it was Bridgeton. And then she became active in, the Bridgeton community, and, she helped serve the people and things, when they had the meals and things. So she was real active, but she called it Bridgeton then, they didn't call it Pattonville.
Okay.
Because, Pattonville, we had Branicki's store, which
Yes.
you've heard about.
Yes, did you have any of the Branicki people in your graduating class?
No, Peggy Branicki would have been the year before me, probably, yeah. But I did work at Branicki's
You
one
did?
summer, yeah.
What was that like?
I worked in the grocery store, just
Mhm.
one summer.
Mm-hmm.
And but we used to, they had the post office, and then the mercantile, they had like dry goods, like material and shoes, and then they had the hardware section, and then they had the grocery store section. And in the grocery store section, when you'd go there with your mother, when you were little, they'd give you a hot dog.
Oh, they give you a hot dog.
He'd just hand you a hot dog while you were standing there.
Wow.
How about that?
I know now at Schnucks you get a free cookie, but,
Uh-huh, yeah.
well, children do anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And then the post office was part of where the mercantile, where all the dry goods and things like that was. But it was limited because, like, if you worked, you wouldn't get there, so you wouldn't get your mail until on Saturday, because if you got off the bus too late,
Mm-hmm.
then it was closed, yeah. And then one of the postmaster, a woman, she lived on Raymond Avenue, a few doors down from Mom. I remember Mom talking about that.
And so what did you do when you worked for Branica Hardware? What was your job?
Oh, well, that was later, because I had my children, and then they were babies. And I just worked one summer because, well, we wanted to buy this house, so we needed some more money.
Right.
And so I just worked one summer, and Mom took care of the kids, which was just a couple blocks away. And I just worked in the grocery store. And he was so nice.
And then who's he?
Well, this was Pete Branicki and Walter Branicki. And I can remember when we would set up the produce, he would say, "Oh, put that aside, put that aside." There was a lady, and I don't know her name or anything, but she was very, very poor.
Oh.
And she would go through the trash for food. Well, what he did was he would throw good apples, and then they would take nice meat bones and things, and then just put them in the trash. She wouldn't accept food, but if they put it in the trash, then she would. And I always thought that was so nice of them to do. They made a point to do that, and I just wanted to say that was very nice of them.
It is,
to do.
in a way that they were helping her without,
Embarrassing her.
yes.
Mhm.
Did you know who the woman was? Did you know who she was?
Yeah, she came every day, yeah. Yeah, and you just sort of set things aside, or else there'd be a can and it would have a little dent in it or
Mhm.
something. Well, then you just sort of put it there for her. So she had it. And I'm sure she knew, but she didn't have to ask.
So she didn't beg, and she didn't have to beg
No,
anyone.
no. They were very kind.
That's
People
very
were
nice.
kind to people without asking for thanks.
That's
Yeah.
good to hear that. Where did your children go to school?
Well, since we lived in St. Anne, they went to Pattonville.
Oh, okay. What
They went to
school?
Briarcrest.
Oh, okay.
Briarcrest was a grade school, which was on 80 Road.
I believe it still is.
Mhm.
Was
still
it
is.
new when they went
It
there?
was new. They started at Mount Pleasant, and then we went to the new school, Briarcrest, and then they went to Pattonville High School, and they graduated from Pattonville High School, and they don't know who's in their class, because their classes were big.
Well, do you remember what years they graduated? Well, how old are your children? Let's put it that way.
Okay, my son was born in 53, and my daughter was born in 55, so he's 56, 57, yeah, so.
Where do they live now, your children?
St. Charles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they live out here, yeah, both of them do. And then my sister lives in St. Anne's still. My sister Margaret, she got to graduate in the new gym.
How did that
Pattonville had
happen?
a new gym. I thought, my gosh, when we went there to see the gym and a basketball court, because there wasn't any when I graduated. My sister and I are 5 years apart in age, and that makes a big difference in a lot of things.
Right, right. What did you think about the building of Northwest Plaza?
It's exciting.
I bet it was.
Yeah. We were
Could you
looking-
imagine if that, and now you were said earlier in this interview that your family kept the cows for Adams Dairy.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the dairy
There was Adams Dairy, yeah.
that was
Well,
at Northwest Plaza?
Apparently he had cows in different pastures, I think, because there was a milking shed, and then there was another shed or a building that was always cold there. In the summertime, my sister and I liked to go in there with Grandpa because it was cool, and I'm sure they had ice in there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, see, but they had, and in the pasture, my grandpa fed them and everything. Then they had a pump, and they had a big tub, and you had to keep the water in it. And that was my sister's and my job, to keep those cows watered. And they'd come, and we would wait, and we'd watch when they were way out in the pasture. And then we'd run down and we'd pump like mad. So because Grandma would say, well, do you have water in there? Yep, it's full. Because when they come up, they go, and then it's empty.
Like a big gulp.
It really was a big gulp.
Mhm.
And then I didn't like that job. And then their tails would hit you because they have flies. And I never liked that job. You know. And but that's what we did. And then the Adams Dairy, in the evening, it seemed like men came, and my grandpa, and they milked the cows, of course, you know, and then they had those separators, because, you know, they had those big contraptions, and that's what they did in that little house that was nice and cool.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Mhm.
So,
What do you think happened to the owner Adams when Northwest Plaza came? Where do you think
I
it?
don't know. I don't know a thing about that. Because, see, that was probably around 49, 50, I don't remember. It was a little later than that,
I think it was toward
And
the
I was
60s.
involved in having babies, and I wasn't,
Did you shop then at Northwest Plaza?
on my lands, yes, I shopped at Northwest Plaza.
Did any of your children like work there as they were teenagers?
My son worked in a restaurant, and my daughter worked at Penny's.
Okay.
And my mother worked at Lane Bryant.
Oh,
And I worked for an attorney in the office tower. Well, I worked for an attorney 37 years, so I worked there. Yeah.
have you been back to Northwest Plaza at all in the past couple of years?
Yes, my sister lives close there. And
What's it like now in 2011, Northwest Plaza?
It's closed. It's all closed.
Is it
There
really?
isn't anything there. It's deserted. It's sad.
Very sad.
It looks very sad, yeah.
And it was just in its heyday. Can you tell us about it?
It was nice. First they had it where you would go and you could listen to, the symphony orchestra would come in the summer, and you'd take your lawn chairs and you could listen to the music. We liked that. And then it was outdoors. Well, then there was a period of time, that was when I was working in the office tower. Then there was a period of time when they were covering it. Well, then you'd stand, I worked on the 9th floor in the office tower, and you could watch the workmen working. I don't know how, they just walked on those rails to do that. And then they'd sit there and eat their lunch.
The scaffolding.
Oh, my word, yes, all those iron workers. And then they covered it over, which was really nice. That was nice, too. And then they, as you probably know, but remember, they had the big Santa Claus on the roof.
I don't remember Santa Claus.
There was a big, tall, 50-foot or 40-foot Santa Claus that they would raise up on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And on the 9th floor, there was a vacant room. And Santa Claus changed clothes there. And I had grandchildren.
Yeah.
And so when they'd come to see me, they thought that was really wonderful because Santa Claus was on my floor.
That is pretty special.
Wasn't that special?
Yes.
Yeah,
So when did you move out to your present location, your beautiful place you have here in St. Charles? How long have you lived here?
I've lived here 14 years. My husband died 16 years ago.
Oh, really?
He had cancer.
Oh.
And he died. And then I moved here because all our doctors are here, and we still continue to go to St. John's Church on 5th Street. And it's close to church and doctors, and now my kids live here.
Well, that's
So
nice.
I have a son, Don, and I have a daughter, Karen, and they both live out here.
I see. That's very nice.
Yeah.
What activities do you remember when your children were growing up in Bridgeton/Pattonville? Was the community center built? Did they have the pool when your children were growing up? Do you remember?
There was a park, a St. Anne Park, where they had built a pool. What activities did they have? Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Like ball? Did they do baseball or Corey League, that sort of thing?
They had Corey League, yeah. My son was in Corey League. But I don't remember. They worked. They worked at Dartmouth Plaza when they were old enough, and otherwise they were in Scouts and whatever. And we lived on a court, so they mostly hung around there, you know. And then when they were old enough to work, then they went up to Northwest and worked. And
I'm sure it provided jobs for many, 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 many people.
oh, it really did. And it was close for everybody to go, you know. And so that worked out good, yeah.
Another question we like to ask people is the Earth City development. And because you live close, what did you think when there was talk about them developing the area now called Earth City?
It will flood.
Yes.
I grew up with floods.
So you,
So I was a skeptic,
right.
and some of it has been right. They've improved it, but I mean, yes, we said, oh, it's gonna flood. That's no good, you know, yeah. And then when they put in the new highway, you know, 370?
Yes.
We wondered, well, there was a lot of speculation. Where was it gonna be? Was it gonna be on my grandpa's farm? Was it gonna be on Pruitt's farm?
Oh,
And, were we gonna make a fortune or not? Well, we didn't. And it was just a fun thing. But, yeah, it was hard to believe that that was all gonna happen.
I think Earth City has done surprisingly well.
It has. It hasn't flooded. They've got good levees, but see, they didn't have good levees then. They had levees further up, and so then the old times, what I'm talking about.
Right.
We knew there would be floods. You know, that was for sure. Yeah, but it's amazing to see how it has advanced and how it's growing and everything.
I think so, and of course we have the concert area, is it called Riverport?
The river, I've
uh,
never been there.
The
but-
name keeps changing,
Yeah, I
you know,
yeah,
but
uh-huh,
where they have the
yeah,
concerts.
uh-huh, yeah.
And of course the Rams practice facility is
I
down
know.
there.
Yeah, it's a lot going on.
There really
a lot.
is.
And it's just, well, it's nice now. Actually, my grandson works for UPS.
There you go.
Which is right there, yeah.
But the
so-
interesting thing, I think, is that Bridgeton did not take ownership of that.
No, they didn't, no, yeah. And they have the quarry, it's not the quarry. I grew up with Westlake Quarry, but the other,
Oh, the Fred Weber Quarry.
Fred Farber, yeah, they have that there too, and that has advanced all over the place, yeah. Yeah.
Well, speaking of Westlake, do you remember the Westlake Amusement Park?
Oh, I do. We went roller skating there, and we had our school picnics there, and actually Westlake was a lot of fun. And we have walk-a-thons there. When I was in high school, we'd go to the walk-a-thon. That was a big deal to
Well,
go
what
to the
was a
walk-a-thon.
walk-a-thon?
The walk-a-thon was, as I remember it, the couples would go there and they would dance night and day. You could go night and day. Can you imagine this? You would go night and day and you'd sit in spectator seats and they would dress up in cute outfits and then they would walk. That's what they did. They just walked and walked and walked. And then they'd have a period where they'd have to dance. And then they'd dance. And then they'd get tired, so then they'd lay on one another, they'd sleep. And you'd pick out your favorites, and you'd root for them. And then they'd have a time when they'd kind of run or do something, and that's when some would fall down and pass out and everything. Oh, you'd root for your...
Sounds like a marathon.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they called it a walk-a-thon. It is a marathon, but they called it a walk-a-thon. And, you know, they had to have dope then, or how did they do that?
I don't know.
But we kids from high school, we'd go there at night, and then it's sort of like the shows down on TV, like Survivor, where they say, well, who got kicked off?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's what you'd go, who got kicked off, you know?
Did they have a panel of judges that,
I think so, yeah, I think so.
but you never participated in a walk-a-thon yourself?
Oh, no, you just went and watched. It was just, I don't remember what we paid anymore, but you just went and sat on the spectator seat, watched them. What fun that was.
We interviewed one man that worked there, and he said his job was to go in the swimming pool and pick up the broken glass that people would break bottles
I think they probably did.
in the
yeah.
swimming pool.
Uh-huh,
And
yeah.
he had to go in there and pick up the
Yeah.
broken bottles.
I didn't go swimming there. I was fortunate. I learned how to swim by my grandparents' home. There was another old farmhouse that was, just a block away. And that was the people from St. Louis came out there, like Pepsi-Cola bottling and different ones. And they had a clubhouse there, and they built a swimming pool.
Oh, really? They built
And
a
that's
swimming
where
pool?
I learned how to swim. Yeah.
Wow.
So I didn't go swimming in Westlake, but I did go swimming there because it was at the clubhouse. And
Mhm.
Grandma would give them chickens and eggs and things like that. Yeah. And but Westlake was fun. And then up at Westlake they had Shell Station. That was a gas station, and they had Mamie's Barbecue or Mammy's Barbecue or something like that.
We've heard a little bit about that.
And they had the blacksmith shop.
Oh, we've heard a little bit about
Several
that.
of those, yeah.
And
so
were all these located basically?
right in that wedge. Here was the amusement park, and here was the road, and then here was Shell and the Mamie's and the blacksmith, and I can't remember, there were other buildings. But I remember the Shell station in particular because we would go with Grandpa and we could get Eskimo pies.
Oh, yes.
That was good. yeah.
I wonder how much they cost.
Oh, well, I wonder too. I don't know anymore. But in the evening, we'd go up there and we'd get Eskimo pies. And then we had to take them home before we could eat them. I know why, because they would drop and then you'd put if this
Oh.
is summertime, you know,
Oh.
so you always had to have a bowl underneath
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But, yeah, that was it. But, yeah,
Now, was all these properties located where Highway 270 is now?
I think so, right in that wedge, because the amusement park did burn, yeah. But it was a nice park, yeah, it was fun. And there were hotels or something on Natural Bridge, because see, Natural Bridge and the Rock Road came in there, and that's where the amusement park was, that's where there were restaurants, and there were some hotels. And I don't know much about any of that because I was young and I just don't know much about that. I do know about the park, and I know that we could go to the park. We had to be careful because, again, there might be somebody there that we weren't supposed to be with. So we always had to be with somebody when we went there. Excepting when I got in high school, then we could go.
Did you ever go into the Grandpa Pigeon store that was?
Oh, yes, I did, yeah. Well, that's how I furnished my house. Because, see, when we got married, we didn't have a big wedding. And there was Grandpa Pigeons there, and you could go in and buy anything, you know, and it was real cheap. So
Now, was that the Grandpa Pigeons on the wedge or up
Grandpa
on?
Pigeons on the wedge. That was
Okay.
the first one.
Okay.
It was just like a junkyard. And then he advanced, and then he went further into Bridgeton and had the nice shop, yeah. But the one that we went to, that we started with in Westlake, it was just piled up, it was really dirty and messy, but you could get nice pots and pans and whatever there, and that's what we did, yeah.
I heard something, I think one of our people told us that he had connection with a pottery also.
Yeah, that Grandpa originally had
I
a
think he did, I
had
don't
a,
know that, it was just
stoneware.
Yeah.
a new thing
business.
to go there, yeah. Because most of the time we shopped in Wellston or St. Charles. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you letting us come today and talk and just hear about life in general for you. And I hope you will return to Bridgeton sometimes, see what's going on.
I do,
Good,
I do.
good. And thank you for letting us come today.
Thank you for having me.